a 57-student boarding school in Williamstown, Massachusetts. Its students and teachers not allowed to carry smartphones while on campus, meaning no Instagram, no TikTok, no scrolling while walking to classes or checking in on how many likes they're getting. The campus has gone completely old school. Students are allowed to call parents or classmates, but only on non-smart devices. The policy took effect this year after faculty noticed an eroding sense of community. Students often look down at screens during meals and even in class where phones are prohibited. Teachers grew tired of being gadget police. Kids retreated to their rooms after class to scroll and text rather than gathering in student lounges. The surprising takeaway was that many of the students say they like this new policy. One student describes feeling a lot happier and a lot more self-aware. That reaction probably less surprising to my next guest. Dr. Anna Lembke is the author of Dopamine Nation, Finding Balance in the Age of Indulgence. She's also a professor of psychiatry and addiction medicine at Stanford University School of Medicine. So, Dr. Lembke, what exactly is dopamine and what does it have to do with my smartphone?
Dopamine is a chemical that we make in our brain. It's fundamental to the experience of pleasure, reward, and motivation, and also key to getting addicted. So when we do something that's reinforcing, whether it's ingesting a substance or engaging in a behavior, we release dopamine in a specific part of the brain called the reward circuit. The more dopamine we release and the faster we release it, the more likely that substance or behavior is to be rewarding. So when we're engaging with these devices, they are very rewarding. They are releasing a whole lot of dopamine in our brain's reward circuitry.
You're making it sound to me, with no credentials in this regard, as booze or drugs or gambling or sex. Is it just the same in that regard?
It really is just the same. So the process of getting addicted to a drug is very similar to the process of getting addicted to a device or to digital media. People start out for one of two reasons: to have fun or to solve a problem. The problem can range from loneliness and boredom to anxiety and depression. If it works, people will return to using it. But the problem is that over time, our brains will adapt to that increased surge of dopamine by down-regulating our own dopamine production, by involuting our own dopamine receptors. And ultimately what we've done is we've decreased our dopamine firing levels, not just to their baseline, but actually below baseline. And now we're in a dopamine deficit state. And that is very much akin to a clinical depression or to an anxiety disorder. So now we're using this substance not to feel good or get high, but just to bring ourselves back up to baseline. And when we're not using, we're experiencing the universal symptoms of withdrawal from any addictive substance, which are anxiety, irritability, insomnia, dysphoria, and craving, intrusive thoughts of wanting to use our drug.
Dr. Lembke, I'm learning all of this from you, and I'm sure that the CNN audience is learning all of this from you. Big tech, they already know this, right? They've got our number.
These are the attention engineers. They've hired the neuroscience minds of our generation. They know exactly what they're doing. We are not using their products. We are their products. They have engineered these devices to be incredibly reinforcing. TikTok really is the equivalent of crack cocaine. I know for myself that the first time I used TikTok, I used it for 3 consecutive hours before I knew what happened. We lose a sense of time when we're chasing dopamine. These digital products are engineered to be addictive, and we are individually and collectively becoming addicted to these devices.
When your book on dopamine came out 2 years ago, maybe a little bit less, you wrote an essay in the Wall Street Journal, and you told a story about a 20-year-old, very, very bright, suffering from anxiety and depression related to this very subject. And in that particular case, instead of prescribing something, meaning some medication, your recommendation was a fast. Can you speak to that and whether that works for everybody?
Yeah, so once we recognize that the fundamental problem is that we're bombarding our reward pathway with too much dopamine, the solution is pretty straightforward. We have to limit our dopamine intake. So for this young man who was addicted to video games, I recommended no video games and in fact, no screens for a single month. Why a month? Because 30 days is about the average time it takes to restore normal dopamine firing. So he put everything away for a month. He went into withdrawal because in those first 2 weeks, it's very, very difficult. People will experience these universal symptoms of withdrawal, which can be physical and mental, even when it comes to behaviors. But by week 3 and 4, he was feeling so much better. Not just better than he had in those first 2 weeks of the dopamine fast, the screen fast, but in fact better than he had in years. He said to me, I'm actually going downstairs, having a conversation with my mother and enjoying that conversation. Now that's rewarding.
So finally, you're the expert in this regard, and yet I'm sure you need, given your credentials and your attainment, you need to rely on social media or at least electronic communication to some extent. How do you get it done? Like in a typical day or in a typical week, what is your fix?
I use self-binding strategies, which is what I recommend in my book. Self-binding strategies are both literal and metacognitive barriers that we put between ourselves and our drug of choice, whatever that drug is, so that we're not just exercising our willpower, we're actually anticipating the pull of the drug in advance. So when it comes to devices, what I do is I make sure I don't touch a device at all until I've made my bed, exercised, eaten breakfast, and brushed my teeth. And then before I actually open my device, I make a list of what I'm going to do on the device. So I'm very intentional in advance about how I'm using that device. I also use time as a self-binding strategy. I make sure I consolidate and limit my time on the device, doing whatever the activity is, so that I'm really focused, not doing 2 things or 3 things or 10 things at once, but doing the one thing on the device that I need to get done, like answer my email, and then getting off the email. Although it's tempting to mindlessly scroll or to mindlessly wait for something new to come in, we have to really be disciplined in advance and create these self-binding strategies so that we limit our consumption. Quantity and frequency matter when it comes to addiction. Access matters. Access is one of the biggest risk factors for becoming addicted. So we have to build a world within this crazy dopamine overloaded world so that we can have healthy relationship with technology.
Everything you've just said makes perfect sense. My executive producer, Catherine, just said in my earpiece, you'd never allow us to get away with that. And she's right, and I need to rethink that because I'm one of those, I'm going to go to a commercial break in a minute. What am I going to do? I'm going to look down and see if there was some reaction to the show that I need to respond to. That was excellent. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
You should do a dopamine fast. If you can't do a month, just do 24 hours. This is my 24-hour challenge for people. No screens for 24 hours. Plan it in advance. Let people know you're not going to be available. Don't let your mind tell yourself stories about why you have to be on. Don't touch a device for 24 hours and notice what you feel.
I'm going to try it. I'm going to try it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Here's some social media reaction that has come in. That sounds a little hypocritical, doesn't it? Hey, let's go to Twitter and YouTube and Facebook. Andy, the smartphone is now part of society. That's the reality. Now, the responsibility sits with educators to teach smartphone etiquette and manners. These lessons then follow students into society. I love the boarding school experience. I'm not surprised at all by the outcome, that the kids are mentally healthier and happier, and they're interacting with one another. I mean, mingling. It's Bill Maher's word, it wasn't mine, but I've been on this subject for a long time. We got to get back to mingling with one another.